Kobe Bryant once scored 81 points in a basketball game. May he rest in peace. Oregon Ducks. They're in a good category, a good class with one of the all-time greats. We got Spencer McLaughlin on the line. Locked on Ducks, locked on Pac-12. Get over there. The information will be on the banner here soon. Spencer is a great follow. Spencer, how you doing today?
I'm ready to get after it, Mark. College football is back better than ever, and gosh almighty, the Pac-12 is the best conference in the country right now. It's not bad.
People come here for we'll get to that in just a second. People come here for in-depth analysis that they can't possibly get anywhere else, because I'm going to make this just, revolutionary type statement. I'm seeing that maybe Portland State wasn't necessarily the test that we need to see Oregon take to really show us what they have this year.
Yeah, I mean we got a little taste of it in week one, but overall, week two is when it really ramps up for the Ducks, and I'm most excited for that and to get into that. But it was nice to have any kind of football back. And after the Georgia game last year, Mark, it was a nice change of pace.
Absolutely. One of those prediction oddities that I like to take a shot at is that I did pick Texas Tech to lose a non-conference game in my preseason predictions, 8-4, and I believe 3 losses in conference. So people assumed it was the Oregon game. I actually picked them to lose last week, and I'm picking a bit of an upset this week at home
Really?
against the Ducks here. So we know that Texas Tech disappointed, but we'll stick with Oregon right now. And I think the big question that people know a little bit about the Oregon football team would be, okay, secondary, a lot of new players didn't get tested last week, held Portland State to 52 yards passing, 8 completions, but it becomes much different with big, tall NFL type bodies at wide receiver for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, it does. And Oregon last week on defense, it felt like they were trying to play everybody, I think, both from a preventative standpoint for injuries and also from let's figure out our rotations standpoint. I think they were really playing a lot of different guys, different combinations, a lot of snaps. I mean, you go just look at, the number of players who recorded tackles in the game, and I don't think the rotations are going to be quite that expansive by the time the middle of the season rolls around. I think they were trying to get guys some reps, trying to see who they liked, who worked in this personnel package or that one. And last week was definitely a tune-up for Texas Tech, who is going to be playing with some ticked off energy because of how their week one performance played out in Wyoming. So I'm not taking them lightly. I don't think that if they were the team I maybe thought they were, they would have lost to the Cowboys. But the line moved for Oregon from -3 to -6.5 or 7, which I think is about right. But that's not going in as an 18, 20-point road favorite or anything like that. Like Texas Tech, I talked about it on today's episode of Locked On Ducks. There are peaks and valleys over the course of a college football season. That was probably a valley for Texas Tech. We've
It
seen the
better be.
lowest. Yeah, it should be. We've seen the worst they can probably play. But through 1 week, have we seen the best they can probably play? No. Are they going to play their best football of the year in week 2 against the Ducks? I mean, we'll see. But I suspect they'll play a better brand of football last week than they did the week prior. I mean, just to keep it on Oregon for a moment, when we got blown out by Georgia last year, when we came and played BYU at home 2 weeks later, we played Eastern Washington the following week. But when we played BYU at home 2 weeks later, did that look like the same football team? Were we playing at the same level as we did 2 weeks prior? I don't think so. So I don't overlook Texas Tech and say, oh, well, this is an easy win now. I think it's a team that is motivated, is still at home, still has some talent on both sides of the ball, and I think has a solid head coach. They just had a bad day last week, and I think Oregon will go in and win, but in no world do I expect it to necessarily be easy just because they had an upset loss a week ago.
Oregon fans, don't be mad at me. While I did predict a preseason upset loss on the road, I do not believe that Oregon or Texas Tech is a better team than Oregon. Number one, because that would be an upset. Number two, I did pick Oregon to win the Pac-12.
Mm. That's how you earn brownie points with the
That's what
fans
I'm
of
hoping for.
literally any team. Like, hey, I think you're gonna have an upset loss here. Oh well, how? I think you're winning the conference championship. All right, you're okay. You're cool. Yeah, it's all good.
So, what do you glean from the 74-point win that you can project forward against a pretty capable opponent?
Well, you can take some things, and week one is definitely not where things are going to be at the end of the season. And I expect things to continue to, evolve in a couple of areas. I was encouraged that Portland State was having success with something early in the game, that being the quarterback run, and that Oregon was able to make adjustments and take that away. And I know it's just Portland State, but baby steps, because last year, all Oregon State did was hand the ball off, and guess what? We didn't make an adjustment. And all Washington did was throw the ball. Couldn't make an adjustment. Couldn't get a stop. So that was at least something. I think the defense looked, aside from the second drive in which they allowed the touchdown, really good the rest of the day. We won't know for sure. It's a positive, like on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel about a 6 about the defense right now. Whereas if they were to play that way against Texas Tech, I'd be feeling it about a 9.5. If they were to go on the road and only allow 7 points and one touchdown drive, that'd be pretty outstanding. I'm not expecting that, but I think that would be really 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 good. So I feel good about where they are on that side of the ball. But just like last year, I was more impressed with the offense, and I mean, the defense certainly had its moments. Special teams came up with a turnover. Special teams had a big punt and a made field goal. That was nice to see for the Ducks, because special teams were pretty weak for the most part last year outside of the field goal kicking game. So I like seeing that. But offensively, I mean, everything looked crisp. There were little wrinkles, a little more RPO from Will Stein in the offense, and I thought it looked very well coached. They didn't have penalties. They didn't have any major injuries. No Whittington, I think, got banged up early in the game. They took him out as a precaution because Oregon didn't need him in that game, and they have a lot of good running backs. So I liked what I saw defensively, and I really liked what I saw offensively. I thought Bo Nix was comfortable. The offensive line performed the way they should. It's just Portland State, but overall, that is how the game against Portland State should look if you're capable of being a really good football team. And I think that's what Oregon is right now in 2023.
Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, Locked On Pac-12. Get on over there, check this out, because this is one of the premier games. This has been a game during the off season that I have looked forward to. That
I think it's at 7 p.m. Eastern, by the way.
It's 7 Eastern. Thank you. I think.
Let me double check that, but I know it's 5 p.m. Mountain Time, which is usually 7 p.m. Eastern.
That would.
But time zones are indeed an oddity, shall we say?
I do think you nailed that one, though.
They confuse me regularly.
So 7 Eastern, folks.
Yeah, 5 p.m. Mountain Time.
I normally don't even put that information on there, so I tried to be more informational for the folks, and I screwed it up. So, so check your local listings.
That's what you get for trying, Mark.
Tyler Shook is trying. He's trying for a 6th year, and so your old buddy Tyler Shook, of course, is going to be on the field. Texas Tech attempted the 6th most passes in the FBS last year. They were one of the top passing attacks with 302 yards passing. I mentioned off the top the big body receivers they have. Jaran Bradley in particular is a big 6'5" receiver as a freshman, ranked high in the Big 12 statistically. So I mentioned off the top the challenge of a new secondary, but also in our conversations during the offseason was your concern about a pass rush that was fairly non-existent through 2022. So what are your thoughts there?
That it's going to be tested this week more than it was against Portland State, who only threw the ball 20 times. It was quick hitters and, a smart game plan from Portland State. Like, they were just so outmatched with personnel, it wasn't going to matter. But if you're going to try and move the ball on Oregon, you have to, be able to run it, which to their credit, they were able to. They have a really mobile quarterback who I think will be a dangerous player for Big Sky teams to watch out this year, because he's elusive. He was really, really shifty. Sachere is how his last name is pronounced, I believe. But, Oregon fans looked at the week 1 box score and said, hey, we didn't have a sack. why didn't we have a sack? And this is off a year in which our leading sacker had 6, and he was an inconsistent pass rusher throughout the course of the season. That was DJ Johnson. He's off to the NFL. He had moments where he looked really good, but it was not consistently there, consistently dominant. We had a historically low pressure rate and sack rate in the 2022 season. And that's kind of where Oregon has revamped. It's not just for this year, but they're looking ahead to next year in the recruiting class. They brought in 10 defensive linemen in the 2023 cycle, which is a lot. And that's because I think Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy and the rest of the defensive staff realized, yeah, we have to be better. We have to be better up front. And that's what they were attempting to do with the moves they made this offseason. But not having a sack in week 1, I think, is reflective of Portland State only throwing it 20 times. They only had 8 completions. There was pressure to lead to those eight completions. So I think that we'll know for sure against a team that actually has drop back passing. Because if you just throw screens and quick hitters and slants, you can't ever expect your defensive line to make a sack. Like that. Like that's even against an FCS opponent. That's just not enough time. Like there are still big guys you got to get through on that side of the ball. So I think that against Texas Tech, we'll have an idea of this defensive line, which is better on paper, right? You bring back Bandon Dorless, who was your best defensive lineman preseason all-conference first team. You bring in Jordan Birch. You have Mateo Uiagalelei in there. You get Popo Amavai back off of injury. Those are key pieces to bolster the defensive line and make them a better unit with the front four, and we'll know for certain how it all looks come Saturday.
So now looking at an offense, granted, that put up 81 points, I think this is less going off of the Portland State game and more going off just your knowledge of personnel and skill sets and so forth. What is a concern? And even if it's not a concern, what just don't you know about at this point that we're going to find out more about on Saturday offensively?
I don't know that I have a concern after the way everything looked from the get-go. Maybe they could have early in the game opened up a few more running lanes. They were in a couple of 3rd and longs that they converted, and those 3rd and 8s aren't going to be quite as easy to pick up against the Red Raiders as it was or as they were against Portland State. So I'm not that worried about it though. I've seen this offensive line only for one game in its current iteration, but there's plenty of talent there and experience. You just have some shuffling around, some guys who are not back from last year, but they're certainly not short on talent. Josh Connerly, number 1 offensive tackle in his class, is now the starter at left tackle. Johnny Cornelius, highly coveted transfers at right tackle. You've got Marcus Harper, who was a starter at guard last year. Jackson Powers Johnson, who was a starter at guard. JPJ is the center, and then you have Stephen Jones at the other guard spot. That was your starting offensive line, and you have some rotational guys in there as well with good depth pieces. And I think Oregon is in a position to be able to run the football successfully. I don't know if throughout the course of the season, if Oregon can do what they did last year, which is allow the fewest sacks in the country. I don't know if that's a reasonable standard. We'll have a better feel for that this Saturday. The offensive line should still be good. It should still be a plus unit. I just know that last year they were so good. I think that's just too high a standard to hold any offensive line to and say, well, if you're not there, then it's a major drop off or anything like that. So I think that puts the onus on Bo Nix a little bit to make sure they're in the right protections, understand the concepts that he's seeing from the defense, and getting the ball out in a timely and efficient manner, and also keeping himself healthy, which unfortunately he wasn't able to do for all 13 games last year. And be able to use his mobility, which is a big reason that Oregon didn't allow a lot of sacks in 2022, because Bo Nix can move and he's a hard guy to tackle. So I think we'll have an idea of how good they can be this Saturday against Texas Tech. I don't think they necessarily play their best game of the year against Texas Tech. Like if they go out and win 31-23 and they barely cover but they look pretty solid, I don't think that's necessarily the best football game the Ducks will play this season, but based on what we saw in week 1, I think they're in pretty good shape on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think they win this game anywhere from 65 to 75% of the time. If the two teams could play 100 times, I think they're in that range. You sound confident. Where would you rank your confidence scale from 1 to 100? Portland State being a 99.9999999 that you're going to win the game. How about this trip to Lubbock?
I'll go 72.
Okay.
I think 72, and I would have been a lot closer to 60 before I saw them, play down to their competition a week ago. But I'm not jumping up into the 80 or 90 department because, like I talked about earlier, you have peaks and valleys over the course of a season. We saw it last year with the Ducks. We saw it in 2021 from the Ducks. I mean, that was a team that went on the road and beat Ohio State. Same team, same players, same coaches, same everything. And Oregon actually had Kayvon Thibodeau in the second game. They didn't have him against Ohio State. They went on the road and lost to a 3-9 Stanford team. Let him hang around, had some disastrous officiating that went against them. But why was Stanford even in the game? Because Oregon played horribly. But they played really well against Ohio State. So I don't doubt that Texas Tech is going to get up for this game. But I think Oregon is in a position to, really thwart Texas Tech's season. And, starting 0-2 is certainly not what they were looking for down in Red Raiders country. But I think the Ducks are favored appropriately in this game, but should not take Texas Tech lightly just because they had a bad game last week. Because you're still going on the road. You're still playing a Power 5 team that won 8 games with a returning quarterback and several other pieces from a season ago. Like, the team themselves, they haven't changed, right? Like, we weren't a big favorite, and I talked about it all summer long on Locked On Ducks about, hey, don't overlook this Texas Tech game. And even though they, bottomed out with how they played a week ago, I'm still not in the mode of, hey, let's not overlook them. This is dangerous. This is a 50-50 game. I think it feels more like a 60-40 game now, but I've seen Oregon lose games where I felt more than 60% confident that I thought they were going to win.
And to bring that correlation full circle, as you well know, that Utah team obviously routed Oregon twice, and they lost to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So, there you go.
Yeah, my dad had a funny text about that when, it was obviously after we'd gotten our butts kicked twice by Utah, and then they went and lost to Ohio State. And he just texted me and some other Duck fans, and he said, "So, if we beat Ohio State beat Utah, does that mean that we are better than Utah?" I was like, the logic is sound.
Take it. Yes.
Spock approved.
Absolutely.